Let's begin by clarifying a couple of terms. So, first, let's distinguish between face-to-face courses and remote or online courses. Face-to-face courses are when learning is happening in person, where learners and instructors are coming together in the same physical space, as opposed to remote or online, where that learning is happening through the internet, through computers. Now, one quick distinction between remote or online. Online courses have been designed for online. They are intended to be fully online. That is their designated mode of operation. However, there has been a distinction to remote, where courses that, due to COVID restrictions, have been pivoted to an online delivery have been referred to as remote, to mark or to understand that temporary state in an online format. Now to clarify the difference between synchronous and asynchronous terms here. The term asynchronous refers to teaching and learning activities that are happening at the same date and time, requiring participants to be online and operating using the same e-learning tool to engage with one another, as opposed to asynchronous forms of engagement, where it is not necessary that everyone be participating or engaging at the same date and time. Rather, learners and instructors can come and go in a more flexible state. There may still be deadlines associated with particular asynchronous activities, but it removes the need for everyone to be coming together at a scheduled time. Now, if I take these four terms and I combine them to show the relationship between the different elements, then we see this Venn diagram that organizes that kind of relationship. There are two major circles of in-person and or face-to-face, and then the remote or online. They can exist on their own. They can also exist as an overlap. That would be referred to as blended learning, some ideal combination of in-person and face-to-face components. Notice within the green circle of remote or online, there is the further distinction between synchronous and asynchronous means, as these terms both imply that there is learning happening mediated through the technology, particularly web-based e-learning technology means. And so as you look to these various overlaps and combinations of different modes or modalities of course delivery, we get to different senses or different versions of teaching and learning that dial up or dial down certain components like in-person or online, asynchronous and synchronous. That high-level heuristic may be helpful, but let's get into some clearer definitions of various course delivery models so that you can start to see how these different combinations might play out. We'll start with face-to-face, which may be considered fairly traditional in terms of instruction happening in person. On-cue and other instructional technologies may be leveraged to support engagement. So, for example, using on-cue to post course materials, to have assignments submitted for discussion board posts, etc. Moving to blended learning, this is that combination of face-to-face and online components. As I go through some of the other definitions on this handout, specifically hybrid, flipped, and online blended, you'll notice how these are all variations of a blended design due to the fact that they do combine the different modalities. Hybrid courses are a particular structure where class sessions are simultaneously offered in person in the lecture hall, while simultaneously being synchronously streamed through lecture capture technology that is offered within that classroom space. So you have students who are in the classroom lecture hall with you, and you have other students who are watching through their computers and participating in other ways than being in the physical classroom space. A flipped design rearranges the series of course activities in a week or in a module to combine different combinations of asynchronous pre or post class tasks with what might be considered in-class time. That in-class time is typically reserved for active learning, whereas the pre and post-class activities are typically reserved for either introduction or follow-up on that active learning. Online blended is, consider it a variation of blended learning, but happening in an online format. So all course activities, including exams, are happening online. However, the synchronous and asynchronous forms of engagement are combined within that online space. So you may actually use some of the elements of a flipped model and adapt it so that there isn't an in-person in-class time, but rather an online in-class time. Quite similar is an online asynchronous course, where all course activities, including exams, are happening online. However, no course activity, including the lecture, requires students to participate synchronously. Everything is asynchronous. Now let's look at the hybrid flexible model, otherwise sometimes referred to as high flex. This is like combining the hybrid and online asynchronous models, such that all course elements are offered in person, so in the lecture hall or on campus. They are offered synchronously through the live streaming, and they are offered through asynchronous online means. All three of these are equal forms of engagement, such that students can choose how to participate based on the modality that's going to work for them. This handout, this single page resource, which is available for download, clarifies terminologies for these various approaches to course design and instructions. As you can see, each model is adjusting those combinations of in-person and online, and then asynchronous and synchronous components to create a course that is, no matter what, thoughtful, learner-focused, and context-specific. I encourage you to think of your course actually as a combination of synchronous and asynchronous means of engagement. After all, face-to-face or in-person is a form of synchronous engagement requiring people to be in the same space and time. It's just that that's happening in person as opposed to happening online. You could switch in and out between those two different formats, still accomplishing synchronous engagement. And so thinking of the course as this combination of synchronous and asynchronous, it's about determining what tasks that students will engage in that are best reserved for a synchronous form of engagement, possibly in person, or asynchronous engagement, and most likely requiring some form of technology or online engagement. And this slide seeks to give some examples of tasks that might be generally considered to be best offered through a synchronous means or an asynchronous means. So, for example, the column on the right lists some tasks that tend to be better reserved for synchronous engagement. For example, actively engaging in application, evaluation, or creation of knowledge with one another in conversation, possibly even through that correcting any misconceptions, or providing formative feedback to students that are going to help them advance and improve their performance. On the left-hand side of the screen, the column on the diagram shows lists tasks that are maybe best reserved for asynchronous forms of engagement, introducing concepts, engaging with information, potentially readings, constructing meaning, checking for comprehension, or managing the logistics of a course. Largely what I have been describing here is, it might fit with the definition of blended learning, which I really like Vaughan, Cleveland, Innes, and Garrison's definition here, that it's really about the thoughtful integration of various modalities where activities and assessments are designed for meaningful student learning, taking into account the overall coherence of the learning experience.